Every December 31st, millions of people around the world make the same silent promise. They look at their credit card statements, their bank accounts, their mounting bills, and they whisper the same desperate words. Next year will be different. They swear they'll save money, pay off debt, live within their means. They believe that midnight on January 1st carries some magical power to reset not just the calendar, but their entire financial destiny. But what if that belief is the trap itself? What if the very concept of new year, new me has been carefully engineered to keep you exactly where you are, financially dependent, perpetually hopeful, and endlessly consuming? Welcome to the hidden ledger, where money, power, and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. Tonight, we're uncovering the dark psychology behind the world's most profitable lie, the illusion that time resets debt, that hope can overcome mathematics, and that your financial freedom is just one resolution away. Because the truth that no credit card company wants you to know is this: every January, promise has already been calculated into their December profits. The calendar deception. The story begins long before credit cards, before modern banking, before the financial complex that surrounds us today. It begins with humanity's oldest obsession, the belief that we can restart time itself. In ancient Rome, the calendar was more than a tool for tracking days. It was an instrument of power. Julius Caesar's calendar reform in 46 BC wasn't just about astronomical accuracy. Some historians argue it was about psychological control. By creating a new year at January 1st, Caesar gave Roman citizens a collective moment of reset, a shared illusion that the debts and failures of the previous year could be mentally erased with the turning of a page. The Romans understood something profound about human psychology. People need hope more than they need mathematics, and hope, properly channeled, could be turned into compliance. Fast forward to revolutionary France in 1793, and you see the pattern repeat with terrifying precision. The French Republic didn't just overthrow the monarchy, they attempted to overthrow time itself. They created an entirely new calendar with new months, new weeks, even new 10-day cycles replacing the 7-day week. According to some scholars, this wasn't merely ideological. It was an attempt to break the psychological cycles that bound people to old habits, old debts, old loyalties. The experiment failed spectacularly. Napoleon abandoned the revolutionary calendar in 1805. But the lesson remained. Those who control the calendar control the rhythm of hope and despair. They control when people believe change is possible. And if you can control when people believe change is possible, you can predict and profit from their behavior with mathematical precision. The birth of consumer psychology. The modern weaponization of New Year psychology began in the early 20th century as mass marketing collided with mass production. According to research from behavioral economists, department stores in the 1920s were among the first to recognize that January wasn't just another month. It was a psychological gold mine. Store owners noticed something remarkable. People would enter their shops in January with genuine intention to spend less, to be more careful with money. But that same intention made them vulnerable to a particular kind of manipulation. When someone believes they're being financially responsible, they become more likely to justify small purchases as rewards for their good intentions. This insight laid the foundation for what some marketing analysts now call resolution marketing, the practice of targeting consumers precisely when they believe they're changing their spending habits. By the 1950s, with the expansion of consumer credit, this psychological manipulation became systematic. Credit card companies discovered that January applications spiked dramatically, not because people wanted more debt, but because they believed they could handle debt better this year. The applications were often accompanied by detailed budgets, carefully planned payment schedules, and genuine determination to pay balances off quickly. Yet, according to industry data, these January accounts consistently showed higher default rates and longer payment periods than accounts opened at any other time of year. The pattern was clear. Hope was making people financially reckless, and recklessness was profitable. The mathematics of false hope. Let's examine how this works in practice, because the numbers reveal a story that no one wants to tell you. Consumer spending data shows a predictable cycle that repeats every year with mechanical precision. December credit card usage spikes by approximately 30% above the annual average. People justify this surge by promising themselves they'll be more careful after the holidays. Then comes January, the month of resolutions. Gym memberships, self-improvement courses, organizational tools, investment in yourself purchases. The average household adds roughly $1,200 to their debt load in January, according to Federal Reserve consumer credit data. But here's the crucial detail. They don't perceive this as increased debt. They perceive it as investment in their financial future. February brings what behavioral economists call resolution fatigue. The gym membership isn't being used. The budgeting app isn't being updated. The careful spending plan encounters its first real-world obstacles. And this is where the cycle becomes truly insidious. March through November become months of quiet accumulation. Small purchases justified by stress, convenience, or the belief that once I get my finances organized, I'll pay this off quickly. Each purchase is small enough to avoid triggering psychological alarm bells, but large enough to ensure the debt grows steadily. By December, the average household carrying credit card debt has added approximately $4,800 to their balance since the previous January. Not from any major crisis or emergency, but from the slow bleed of daily financial decisions made by people who genuinely believe they're being responsible. And then comes December 31st, the moment when millions look at their statements and make the same promise. Next year will be different. The cycle resets, the trap closes. And somewhere in a boardroom, someone is calculating next year's profit projections based on this entirely predictable human behavior. The industry of broken promises. What makes this cycle particularly troubling is how thoroughly it has been studied, understood, and optimized by the financial services industry. Internal marketing documents from major credit card companies, obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests and regulatory filings, reveal sophisticated psychological profiling of January applicants. These are consumers flagged as particularly valuable because their combination of high hope and low financial literacy makes them likely to carry balances for extended periods while maintaining minimum payments. The language used in these documents is telling. According to public regulatory filings, some companies refer to January marketing campaigns as aspiration cycles and their targets as optimistic borrowers. The goal, clearly stated in several documents, is to capture consumer intention at peak motivation while minimizing rational evaluation of terms and conditions. Translation: catch people when they're hopeful enough to sign up, but not careful enough to read the fine print. This extends beyond credit cards into virtually every sector of the financial economy. Mortgage refinancing applications spike in January as people believe they'll be more organized about home finances this year. Investment account openings surge as people promise themselves they'll finally start investing seriously. Student loan applications for continuing education programs peak in early January, justified as investment in my earning potential. Each of these decisions, individually, might be perfectly rational, but the timing reveals the psychological manipulation at work. Companies across the financial spectrum have learned to synchronize their marketing with the predictable rhythms of human hope and despair, the credit trap mechanism. But perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of this system is how it transforms hope into long-term financial dependency. Consumer credit research indicates that accounts opened in January are more likely to remain active and carry balances for longer periods than accounts opened at any other time. This isn't because January applicants are fundamentally different people. It's because they enter the credit system at a moment of maximum psychological vulnerability. Consider how this works. Someone applies for a credit card in January as part of a broader financial resolution. They receive a card with, say, a $3,000 limit. Their plan is to use it only for emergencies and pay it off immediately. But January is expensive. New gym clothes for the resolution to exercise more. Organizational supplies for the resolution to be more organized. A few books or courses for the resolution to learn new skills. None of these feel like debt. They feel like investments in the new me. By February, they're carrying a balance of $800, not enough to panic about, but enough that the minimum payment becomes a line item in their budget. They tell themselves they'll pay it off once things settle down. March brings the first month where they pay only the minimum. April brings an unexpected car repair that gets added to the card. May brings a small vacation, justified as stress relief, that will help them focus better on their finances. By December, that $3,000 limit is nearly maxed out. Minimum payments consume a significant portion of their monthly income, and the original financial resolutions have been forgotten entirely. The person has become what the industry internally calls a profitable customer, someone generating steady monthly revenue with low risk of complete default. And the beauty of this system, from the industry's perspective, is that the customer blames themselves. They don't see systematic manipulation, they see personal failure, which makes them more likely, not less, to try again next January. The psychology of temporal landmarks. Recent research in behavioral psychology has given this phenomenon a name: the fresh start effect. Studies show that people are more likely to initiate goal-directed behavior at temporal landmarks, moments that feel like new beginnings. New Year's, birthdays, the start of new seasons, even the beginning of new weeks or months can trigger this psychological reset. The effect is so powerful that it overrides rational assessment of past performance. Even people who failed to achieve identical goals in previous years experience renewed optimism when approaching a new temporal landmark. What's particularly concerning is how thoroughly this psychological quirk has been mapped and exploited. Marketing firms now employ behavioral economists specifically to identify and target these fresh start moments across different demographic groups. The tactics have become incredibly sophisticated. Email marketing campaigns timed to arrive at precisely 11:47 p.m. on December 31st, when people are most likely to be reflecting on the coming year. Social media advertisements that specifically reference New Year, New Financial You during the first week of January, when resolution motivation peaks. Even the structure of promotional offers has been optimized around this psychology. 0% interest for the first 12 months promotions launch in January because companies know that people making financial resolutions are more likely to believe they'll pay off the balance before the promotional rate expires. Internal industry data suggests that fewer than 12% of people who take these promotional offers actually pay off the balance before the rate jumps to standard levels. The compound effect of cyclical debt. What makes this pattern particularly destructive is how it compounds over time. Most people don't recognize that they're caught in a cycle because each year feels like an isolated attempt at financial improvement. But debt doesn't reset with the calendar. A person who adds $2,000 to their credit card debt in one resolution cycle starts the next year already carrying that burden, plus accumulated interest. Their fresh start begins from a position of greater financial stress, which makes them even more susceptible to the emotional spending that derails financial goals. According to longitudinal studies of consumer debt patterns, the average American household increases their total debt load by approximately $1,800 per year, despite making regular fresh start resolutions to reduce spending and pay down debt. The correlation between New Year resolution making and this steady debt accumulation is remarkably strong. This creates what some economists call a hope spiral, a pattern where each failed attempt at financial discipline leads to renewed hope that this time will be different, which leads to decisions that make success even less likely. The psychological toll of this cycle is significant. People begin to see their financial struggles as personal character flaws rather than the predictable result of systematic behavioral manipulation. This shame makes them less likely to seek help, less likely to educate themselves about financial literacy, and more likely to seek comfort through the very consumer spending that created the problem in the first place. The resolution industry. What most people don't realize is that the modern resolution culture has become an industry unto itself, one specifically designed to fail profitably. Gym memberships provide the clearest example. Industry data shows that approximately 80% of people who join gyms in January stop attending regularly by March. Yet gym business models depend on this pattern. Facilities are built to accommodate only about 20% of their membership base at any given time. If all members actually used their memberships regularly, the gyms would be impossibly overcrowded. The gym industry has essentially monetized false hope. They sell annual memberships to people who are statistically unlikely to use them, counting on the combination of New Year optimism and cancellation friction to maintain revenue from non-users. This model has spread throughout the economy. Subscription services launch major marketing campaigns in January, knowing that people making resolutions are more likely to sign up for services they'll forget to cancel. Language learning apps, meal delivery services, productivity tools. Entire sectors of the economy now depend on January optimism, followed by February abandonment. Even more troubling, some of these services are specifically designed with what behavioral economists call abandonment friction, complicated cancellation processes that keep people paying for services they're no longer using. Internal company documents obtained through regulatory investigations show that some subscription services derive 40% or more of their revenue from zombie subscribers, people who signed up during resolution periods and never properly canceled. The debt forgiveness illusion, perhaps the most insidious aspect of the New Year financial cycle, is how it creates an illusion of control over debt that doesn't actually exist. Many people treat January 1st as a kind of psychological bankruptcy, a moment when they mentally forgive themselves for previous year's financial mistakes and start fresh. This mental reset feels empowering, but it has no impact on actual financial obligations. Credit card balances don't disappear because you've made a resolution. Interest charges don't pause for personal transformation. Late payment marks on credit reports aren't erased by good intentions. Yet the psychological relief of starting fresh often reduces the urgency people feel about addressing existing debt. They become focused on preventing future financial mistakes while ignoring the compound growth of current obligations. This misplaced focus has measurable consequences. Data from credit counseling organizations shows that people are significantly less likely to seek debt reduction help in January and February than during other months of the year. The false sense of control created by resolution making actually delays practical action on debt management. Meanwhile, the debt continues growing through compound interest, making eventual resolution more difficult and expensive. What could have been addressed with a few months of focused debt payment in January becomes a multi-year struggle by December. The marketing of financial optimism. The financial services industry has become extraordinarily sophisticated at marketing to people in resolution mindset, because they understand that hope can override mathematical reasoning. Investment firms launch major advertising campaigns in January featuring stories of people who turned their finances around in 1 year. These stories are technically true, but statistically misleading. They represent the extreme outliers of financial performance, not typical results. Similarly, Debt consolidation companies flood media channels in January with messages about fresh starts and clean slates. The timing isn't coincidental. People making financial resolutions are more likely to see debt consolidation as a solution rather than as another form of borrowing. Even more mainstream financial institutions participate in this pattern. Banks promote New Year savings challenges and resolution banking packages specifically designed to capture people during their most optimistic moment about financial change. The language used in this marketing is carefully crafted to reinforce the illusion that financial problems are primarily a matter of willpower and timing rather than systematic behavioral patterns and mathematical realities. The calendar as financial weapon. What emerges from this analysis is a disturbing picture. The calendar itself has become a tool of financial control. By creating artificial cycles of hope and disappointment, the financial system ensures a steady stream of customers who believe their problems are temporary and personal rather than structural and systematic. The New Year resolution cycle serves multiple functions for financial institutions. It generates predictable spikes in new customer acquisition during January. It creates psychological conditions that make people more likely to take on additional debt. It establishes patterns of cyclical thinking that prevent people from addressing long-term financial problems. It transforms systematic exploitation into apparent personal failure, reducing the likelihood of organized resistance or regulatory intervention. Most importantly, it ensures that people remain trapped in cycles of financial dependency while believing that freedom is always just one more resolution away. The historical pattern. This pattern isn't new. It's the latest evolution of a system that has used cyclical psychology to control economic behavior for centuries. Medieval lords used harvest cycles to control peasant debt, ensuring that farmers would borrow against future crops and remain bound to the land. Colonial powers used seasonal trading patterns to keep colonies dependent on manufactured goods from the mother country. The Industrial Revolution created new cycles: payday lending, seasonal employment, boom and bust economic cycles that served similar functions of maintaining economic control through temporal manipulation. What's different about the modern resolution cycle is its psychological sophistication. Previous systems relied primarily on economic coercion. The resolution system relies on people voluntarily participating in their own financial manipulation, believing they are making free choices toward financial improvement. Breaking the cycle. Understanding this system is the first step toward escaping it, but escape requires more than just individual willpower. It requires systematic changes to how we think about time, money, and personal transformation. Some financial advisors who understand these patterns recommend what they call anti-resolution financial planning, making major financial changes in off-peak months like April or September, when psychological pressure and marketing manipulation are at their lowest levels. Others suggest continuous improvement models that spread financial goals across the entire year, rather than concentrating them in artificial, fresh start moments. The most effective approaches, according to behavioral finance research, involve removing the emotional component from financial decisions as much as possible. Automatic savings programs, automatic debt payments, and systematic investment strategies that operate regardless of calendar dates or emotional states. But individual solutions, while important, don't address the systematic nature of the problem. As long as the financial system profit from cyclical hope and disappointment, they will continue to engineer and exploit these patterns. The real fresh start. Perhaps the most important realization is this: genuine financial change doesn't require a calendar date. It doesn't require perfect timing, ideal conditions, or a magical moment of transformation. Real financial change happens when people understand that their struggles aren't personal failures, but predictable responses to systematic manipulation. It happens when they stop waiting for fresh starts and start implementing sustainable systems. It happens when they recognize that every January promise has been calculated into someone else's profit margin, and decide to stop participating in that calculation. The calendar will continue to turn. January 1st will continue to arrive every year, and millions of people will continue to make the same desperate promises to themselves. But understanding the system behind those promises, understanding how hope has been weaponized against financial freedom, is the first step toward genuine change. Because the real fresh start isn't a date on the calendar. It's the moment when you realize that your financial future isn't determined by resolutions, but by systems. Not by hope, but by mathematics. Not by perfect timing, but by consistent action. And that moment can happen on any day of any month, including today. As we approach another new year, millions of people will make the same promise they've made before. They'll look at their debt, their savings, their financial chaos, and they'll whisper, "This year will be different." But now you know the truth. The system doesn't want this year to be different. The system profits from the cycle of hope and failure, from the illusion that financial problems can be solved with calendar-based resolutions. The real resolution, the one that no credit card company wants you to make, is this. Understand that your financial future isn't determined by dates, but by systems. Not by hope, but by knowledge. Not by promises to yourself, but by understanding the promises that have already been made about you. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. And the rhyme of false hope and cyclical debt has been playing for centuries, getting more sophisticated with each iteration. The only way to break the cycle is to stop listening to the rhythm altogether. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.